Okay, the date is the 12th of August 2017. This is a WarGen interview with Frederick Roy Hull. Interviewer is Christopher Moriarty. Now your name is Frederick Roy Hull, but you've always been known as Roy.
Well, my name's Frederick William Patrick.
Okay.
After my father and my paternal grandfathers. But my mother never liked any of the names at all.
Right.
And she said, right, it's going to be Roy. And I've been Roy from the cradle, through school, through the services, with my nieces and nephews, with my grandchildren, with my great-grandchildren. I'm Roy, always have been.
Alright, sir. Can you tell me your name, rank and serial number at the end of your service?
Yes, I was Petty Officer Frederick William Patrick Hull, CJX 712331, and I was a Petty Officer Gunnery Instructor.
Okay. When and where were you born, Roy?
I was born in May Road, Twickenham, and I'm told I came in a little black bag on the back of the bike of Nurse Higney. And that's why I always believe babies came from. They were delivered by bag.
What did your father do?
My father worked in a music shop at the time, repairing musical instruments, and he's also a French polisher.
Right. Your mother stayed at home, did she, looking after you?
Mother was a housewife, stayed a housewife right up until the war came in, and of course, like most women, she went into munitions, actually.
All right.
In part because of the war, as did a lot of women at that time.
Did your father serve in the First World War at all?
My father served with the King's Royal Rifle Corps and went to France, and he was injured at Ypres. A piece of shrapnel entered his forearm somewhere, and it travelled down his arm to his wrist and out through his thumb. And as long as I can remember, my father always had a thumbnail that grew in two halves.
All right.
It resulted in him being sent home to a hospital in Chatham for, obviously, recovery. I think this must have been 1917, and of course the war ended in 1918, so he never ever went back.
Okay. Do you have any brothers and sisters?
Yes, I have. I'm the eldest of three. I have a sister, Vivian Mary, who was born on the 29th of May 1931, I think. And my young brother, who unfortunately is no longer with us, was born on the 20th of December. Oh Lord, 1936.
Right.
So, and because he was so near to Christmas, he got the name Christopher.
Right.
And I remember he hated it because having a birthday so close to Christmas, he invariably didn't come off too well as far as presents were concerned.
What was it like when you were growing up there? Do you have a happy childhood?
Yes, I did. We never had a lot, as did a lot of people in those days. We lived in the council house. We ate well, and we didn't have holidays like families have today going away. I think we had a ride on a charabanc with solid tyres down to the coast to Brighton and to see relatives who lived at Southsea. No, we never had a lot. We used to get our usual presents at birthdays and Christmas time. And it was a family time then. All the family used to meet, the Kylies in particular, more so than the Haas. I remember the Kylie parties. My mother was one of 13.
All right.
The second eldest of 13. Two died young, so there were only really 11 survived, and my father was the eldest of 7. My grandfather, my mother's father, was a market gardener, and I remember him working on market gardens in what is now Heathrow Airport, London Airport.
All right.
Used to belong to a gentleman by the name of Secret's Market Gardens, and I always remember he had a back-breaking job.
Right.
My father's father was a master baker.
Okay.
And spent all his life in the bakery doing night work, I suppose. Baking bread. I only remember him as a white-haired old gentleman, really.
All right. What do you remember about the build-up to the war and the outbreak of war?
Well, there was always something going on, like to-ing and fro-ing between Mr. Chamberlain, who was the Prime Minister then, going over and supposedly getting an assurance from Adolf Hitler that he didn't have any big intentions about Europe or claiming any of it, which was all a load of eyewash, of course.
Yeah.
And he flew back. I remember seeing him, I suppose it would have been in the news, she didn't have television those on, at the cinema, getting off an aeroplane and waving a piece of paper and saying peace in our time.
Yeah.
Which unfortunately didn't last very long. And the Germans were always threatening to invade.
So can you remember the actual outbreak of war?
Yeah, I remember it very well. Sunday morning. And Chamberlain came on the radio and said that he had asked Adolf Hitler to withdraw his forces from Poland, otherwise a state of war would exist between England and Germany. And he came on and said, no such assurance having been given, I now declare that a state of war now exists.
Right.
And I think about 10 or 15 minutes later, I remember one of our neighbours going up and down the road saying, go indoors and put your gas masks on. He panicked somewhat.
Right.
And then later in the day I remember going out with a shovel and filling sandbags.
The same day war was declared?
The same day that war was declared, yeah. We'd done it at the recreation park, I remember. And that actually became an intermediary fire station, an ARP station. And I think the sandbags were used to protect the windows and doors around it.
Alright.
And of course, lot of neighbours, husbands and sons, the older ones, all of a sudden went off to war.
So how old were you in 1939, Roy, if you don't mind me?
I would have been, the war was declared on the 3rd of September 1939, and I would have been 12 on the 19th of October following.
Right.
So I was 11 and 11 months.
Okay. Do you remember the Battle of Britain at all?
Oh, vividly, yes. I mean, as the war got into its stride, so to speak, we were always being raided by German bombers at night time. And I was very reluctant. I used to upset my mother. I wouldn't get out of bed and go under the stairs where we had our bedding, which was considered one of the safer places.
Why wouldn't you do that?
Well, I thought that if there's any harm going to come to me, it would come to me whether I was in bed or under the stairs.
Right.
And I liked my bed. And I remember my mother would shout and shout at me. And the one thing that did make me move was when I heard the whistlings of the bombs coming down.
Right.
Then I would move myself. I would move myself and go down.
Did the area you live in suffer much bomb damage, Roy?
We did indeed. But they built a lot of shelters, communal shelters across, plus people had individual shelters, Anderson shelters as they were called,
Yeah.
which went up in the garden. And they were made comfortable, or as comfortable as possible, with blankets and food and biscuits and tea making and coffee making or cocoa making materials in there. And families used to spend a lot of time. And there were all sorts of shelters. Then there was an Anderson shelter. Another one it was like a steel cage. Used to be indoors. You used to crawl into it. It was only about 3 foot high, I remember.
Right. So the idea being that would protect you if the house collapsed.
Well, yes, that was it. That was the idea, that you wouldn't get trapped.
Okay.
But in the communal shelters, which were zigzag under the park, there were bunks, and we used to push our blankets and our toilet gear down in the pram, an old pram.
All right. How many of you will be going then if you everything in the pram?
Well, there would have been Mum and the 3 children.
Right.
Dad wouldn't be there. He was working. In fact, when the war came, he'd move from doing musical instruments and that, and he became a painter and decorator. But then, when the war came, he went and worked for the London Transport on security.
Right.
And he was like a night watchman. He used to guard the gate of the depot at Fulwell depot, where the trolley buses and I think the trams had finished by then, but the trolley buses were there.
Okay. What made you join up, Roy?
Well, my mother had 4 brothers who were all in the services to get away from home because they didn't like sleeping top to tail.
Right.
And 3 of them joined the Navy between the wars.
Right.
All joined as boy seamen. And the other one failed an eyesight test, so he became a merchant sailor.
Right.
And we used to have letters and cards from them between the wars of them in China and Malaya and Singapore and pictures of them. And when they came home on occasion with a parrot. I think one had a monkey on one occasion.
What, brought a monkey home?
Yeah, brought a little marmoset monkey. And then I had a sort of a closeness about the Navy. I suddenly wanted to be a sailor. And then, of course, when the war came, I thought, well, I ought to go in the Navy. I really didn't consult my parents about it very much. In fact, I think I went off of my own accord to join up in Charing Cross Road, London.
Right.
I travelled up on the train to Alhambra House. And there was...
And that was a specific Navy recruiting office, wasn't it?
It was a Navy recruiting office. And I remember there was an old chief petty officer there. Does your mother and father know about this, laddie? He said. And I said, well, they'll know about it now.
So when did you actually... Can you remember the date you actually started in the Navy?
I must have gone up in the spring of 1943. And I recall I had to do an education test. It was, I think, just to make sure that you weren't an imbecile. Add a few figures together and that sort of thing. And I came back and told Mum and Dad that I'd joined the Navy and that I would be going eventually. And of course by that time I was attending the grammar school. I'd passed the 11 plus before the war and gone to grammar school.
Right.
And my mother said, well, this is daft because you're not going to complete school, so we'll have to go down and tell them. I remember coming down to the school and seeing Mr. Bligh and said, well, Frederick, because she had to refer to me as Frederick rather than Roy,
Yeah.
has joined the Navy and will be enlisted soon, so there's no point in him carrying on with his education. And I remember being told where he was bitterly disappointed because he said he'd hoped that I would have stayed on and perhaps gone to university. Anyway, I left school. I would imagine it would have been Easter of 43. Either Easter or summer.
So sometime between Easter and summer was when you started in the Royal Navy?
Well, no, I didn't. I left school because I'd signed up for the Navy and would be going as soon as they called me.
Right.
In actual fact, nothing happened for a while. And having finished school, I got a job. And I worked in the American Air Force. At Bushy Park, Teddington. And I was a mimeographist.
A mimeographist?
A mimeographist, and a mimeograph is a duplicating machine.
Okay. Gotcha.
Now what I used to do was put these stencils on a drum and then put how many copies I wanted and then start the thing up. Or when I don't know if I used to wind it or whether it was electric or what. And then they put them into various boxes to departments. I worked in the Judge Advocate General's department.
Can you remember which American air group this was?
It became the Supreme Headquarters of the Allied Expeditionary Forces.
Right.
SHAEF,
Yeah.
as it was then. And the big boss who was there was Eisenhower.
Right.
Because he was made Supreme Commander.
Okay.
And I enjoyed it there because I used to ride around in jeeps with the driver, and I got friendly with Americans and it used to take me horse riding to the stables in Bushy Park.
Alright.
And I used to go to the USO concerts, which was like our ENSA.
Yep.
And I remember seeing Joseph Louis Barrow, Joe Louis, the boxer,
Right.
and a film star called Carol Landis,
Yep.
and a film star Adolph Menjou, and who else was there? Oh, several of them. Oh, and the other person I saw was the band leader who actually later in the war got lost over the
Glenn Miller.
channel.
Glenn Miller.
Glenn Miller, that's him. He used to play every other week with his band, Glenn Miller. And of course they were all army personnel.
Okay, we'll take a quick break now, Roy.
Douglas Fairbanks Jr. He came there as a lieutenant commander in the US Navy.
Okay, we'll take a quick break there. Okay, so can you remember, Roy, when you actually went to a Royal Navy establishment after your sign-up? So,
Yeah, there came there came the day, of course, when the letter arrived to say, you are to report. And I, in fact, had to report back to Alhambra House, where I'd actually joined up. Now, as far as I can recall, that was September 43.
Right.
So, yeah. And I went up to Alhambra House, and I remember there was some tea and biscuits and that there, and then all these youngsters kept arriving, and then we were told that there was a bunch coming up from Southampton and Portsmouth, and eventually there must have been, I don't know, 15 of us, and we marched out the back and got on board an army lorry and were taken to Euston Station. Now, when I went up, my dad came with me, and I recall this chief PO saying to him, I'm not supposed to tell you this, Dad, because it's troop movements, but they'll be leaving Euston this afternoon at 4 o'clock.
Right.
So he said, if you want to come back and say goodbye to him. And then my dad decided to do that. Anyway, we had carriages reserved for us, and eventually we got on the train and headed north, and we went to Preston, I recall, where we got off the train and climbed aboard another lorry, and were taken to an army camp where we were lined up and issued with a straw paddy-ass and a blanket, and then to a Nissen hut and told that we would be there overnight before proceeding to Fleetwood to catch the boat to take us to the Isle of Man.
Now, Roy, you say a straw palliasse?
Straw paddy-ass, yeah, a mattress thing.
Right.
And I remember when we woke up the next morning, we were all coochie.
Coochie?
All scratching.
So you hadn't been issued uniforms or anything?
Oh, no, we were still all in our mufti, as it were. And then anyway, next morning we mustered and went aboard the lorry again, and we were taken to Fleetwood and went aboard the ferry to the Isle of Man. Because the boys' training ship, HMS Ganges, which had been established for years and years, and to which all my uncles had been when they were youngsters between the wars, was closed down. Not closed down, they got rid of the boys.
Okay, right, so the HMS Ganges was the training base that was near Harwich in Essex, and that was so boy sailors were no longer going there. That's why you were going to the Isle of Man.
Well, they stopped the boys from going there, and it was used for hostilities only, people who were in for the war. And all the boys were in fact transferred to Cunningham's holiday camp in Douglas, Isle of Man, which became known as HMS St George.
Right.
So that's where we were heading. Anyway, we caught the ferry from Fleetwood across to Douglas, got aboard a lorry, and it stopped outside the gates, I remember, and we fell in, and the chief petty officer was there. He said, those are the pearly gates, he said. Now, if any of you want to change your mind, you can find your own way home.
Right.
But once you go through them pearly gates, the king and country's got you.
Right.
Because nobody moved, and in through the gates we marched, and into the new entry division. And incidentally, more boys had joined the ship, or the ferry, from various parts of England, Scotland, Wales, and there must have been, I don't know, 50 of us, 60 of us. And we went into the new entry division. And then the next couple of days we spent collecting uniforms. Gas mask, tin helmet, kit bag, hammock, blanket, and getting our hair cut, which was the most important thing.
Right.
And that was an up and over.
Up and over?
Up and over with the razor. They didn't leave you much hair.
Right.
I suppose they thought, well, once they got it off, we wouldn't have to worry about it too much again. And we slept in the chalets. As I say, it had been a holiday camp, and there were chalets there where campers had lived, and that's where we went. Four to a chalet. And then the next day, of course, we had to climb into uniforms, and then we visited the tailor, and he made chalk marks where the uniforms had to be changed or altered, and one thing they were like a sackcloth, I remember. And then we spent the next week or so going to the sick bay, getting inoculations, being examined, by saying drop your trousers, cough, and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And the swimming pool where we had to prove that we could swim, and dive for a brick at the bottom of the pool. Was
there a minimum distance you had to swim, Roy?
No, I don't recall there was a minimum distance. You just had to be seen to be swimming, and to recover this brick from the... And incidentally, you didn't wear a costume, you wore a duck suit, which was a white canvas suit.
Right.
That sailors used to wear abroad at one time. A very cheap cottony stuff. And it clinged, as you can imagine, it clinged to you when you got out of there. And I don't recall how long you were in the new entry division. I think it was a matter of weeks, generally getting acclimatised to the Navy and finding out what it was all about. We found out that the captain of HMS St George was Captain Bell, who'd been captain of the Exeter at the Battle of the River Plate.
All right.
Dinger Bell and his wife, because they lived on the site. Then eventually we became classes, and the camp itself was in two halves. One half, one side of the road, the other half was the other side of the road, and there's a tunnel used to go underneath. And new entry division and the playground and the gymnasium and a lot of the classrooms were, not classrooms, but instructional rooms.
Lecture rooms and stuff like that, yeah.
But this side, and where you lived, where you slept and done your toiletries, was through the tunnel in upper camp, what they call upper camp.
Right.
And I became a member of Benbow Division, and they were named after Admirals Benbow, Anson, Nelson, all that sort of thing.
Yep.
I was Benbow 190, which was advanced class boys, and Benbow 90 was ordinary boys. So I was considered to be one of the cleverer ones, I suppose,
right.
as I was an A-class boy. And then straight away you started doing all your instructions. Now, in the summer months, you do instructions morning and evening, and the afternoon was spent, no, morning and afternoon. And then in the evening you would do instructions again after you'd had tea. But in the winter you used to do instructions in the morning, athletic athletics and pastimes in the afternoon when it was still light, and school in the evening.
Yep. Now, when you say instructions, Roy, what exactly are you doing in instructions?
You would spend, you might do seamanship in the morning, or gunnery, or signals, and then you go to school in the afternoon, and school was at about 3-4 miles away, a proper school, but it belonged to the Navy,
right,
solely. And you used to march there every day. Or every day we done school. Big column. You'd always carry your Macintosh.
Right.
To go your arm because in case it rained. And in the middle of the column there'd be 3 drummers, just to keep the time.
So you'd march to the time of the drums to go to school.
Go to school. And then in the afternoon. If you done school, you would do it, you'd reverse it week after week. You'd go to school in the morning, seamanship in the afternoon, and then pastimes, sports at night time. Then the next week you would do signals in the morning, school in the afternoon.
Yeah. For seamanship training, did you do anything on the water, or was this all theory?
We used to go down to the dock at Douglas, and we had boats down there, and then we used to take the boats out.
Were you sailboats, right?
Well, cutters and whalers with sailing masts and everything, and you used to have to sail round them, or row, learn to put on your oar now.
Yep.
And our instructor, I remember, if you weren't paying attention to instructions in the boat, he'd take the tiller out and throw it at you. He wasn't a very nice man. Spider Ibbot. We called him Spider because he was like a spider. And if you misbehaved during the course of instruction with him, he used to say, report to my chalet tonight at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock. And he'd say, right, get the bat. And, oh no. And behind the door in his chalet there used to be a cricket bat.
Yeah.
Get the chair. Used to get the chair, and then he used to put your body over the back of the chair, grab hold of the seat, and he'd get the bat and he'd wipe your backside.
Oh, good heavens.
He'd give you 2 or 3 till you made you wince, and then he'd say, there's the pen, sign it. And you used to have to sign your name on the bat. Put it back behind the door. Ballacameen was the name of the school. What I remember particularly about that is when you done your last trip before leave, if you're going on leave, Christmas or Easter or whatever it was, they used to try and break the record to do the 4 miles.
Right.
And what happened, you'd have a whole column of boys, seamen, and there'd be the naval schoolmasters would be marching with them. And they weren't very much disciplinarians really, they were, teachers. And the drummers would go, and then they'd walk alongside them and say, slow down! And they'd slow down. And then he'd go up the side again and get faster and faster. I don't know what the record was for marching back, but the people at Douglas used to get used to us, I think, going past their houses on the top of the road. And then you had, and when you done sports, it was organised sports. You either played football, you played hockey, or you played rugby, or you done boating. And then you'd have sessions where you'd do washing, laundry, and you'd scrub your hammock and wash your blankets and do all that sort of thing. But we used to get up about, I think we used to get up about 6:30 and used to fall in and then do the chores around the chalets, cleaning the gardens, sweeping the lines and making it look tidy until you do that till 7 o'clock. Then you used to go and wash, shave, if you were shaving, get your uniform and go to breakfast. 8 o'clock or something. And into the dining hall. And all our food was served on tin plates.
Right.
Really, we were always hungry. People used to get parcels from home and always used to worry about where they got food inside.
Right. Was the whole thing a bit of a shock to the system, Roy, or were you all young enough that you just...
Well, it was, because I don't suppose any of us had sort of discipline like that at home. I would have doubted. It was very much discipline. Yeah, despite it, but this chap I'm talking about, he used to wear a whistle and chain. He was a gunnery instructor, like I later became. And I thought so, but I'd never be like him. But he would take this chain off, and you would be doing rifle drill, and he'd go like that with this chain on you across your hands, and that when it was cold, and he was. Oh, I used to say if I ever met him at sea, I'd push him over the side. I think what he was a time expired sailor from pre-war who came back as a reservist.
Yep.
And because of his age, he didn't go to sea. He was sent to the boys' training as an instructor. But for them, we would have not had instructions. And then once during the course, you would have work ship, and you would do all the chores in the camp, like I don't know. How can I say it? You didn't devote your time to instructions. You devoted your time to working for the benefit of the camp,
right.
Doing jobs around.
So maintenance and
that sort of
like
thing. Yeah. And I remember if you got, it's really hard when I think back to it. If you got mail from home, you used to have to open it in front of a wren in case you got money in it, and they'd take it off you and keep it because you weren't allowed to have, a lot of money.
Right.
We incidentally used to get 2 shillings a week when you were a boy seaman. You earned more than that. You earned 8 and 6pence, I think, but you only got 2 bob.
Right.
And you used to have to go to the gymnasium on I think we get paid on a Friday or something like that. You used to have to put your gym shoes on because you didn't dare damage the gymnasium floor.
Yep.
And it was all stepping forward very smart like. And the instructors would be standing there, and you used to take your hat off, call your number out.
Yep.
712-331. Oh, sir. And they used to put 2 shillings in the middle of your hat, plus a little white coupon, which allowed you to buy a bar of chocolate or Kit Kat or something like that in the canteen. But while you got your hat off, the instructor would be standing there, and he'd say, haircut.
Looking back on it, Roy, do you think the whole training regime prepared you for what was to come on board a ship? Or could it have been better?
No, it taught you taught you to work together. It taught you about sailoring, about the things that you come up against, in jobs on board a ship,
Right.
and that sort of thing. But as knots and splices and signals,
Right.
and boating, hoisting boats and lowering boats and all that sort of thing that you would do on board a ship. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that you got amongst your kit was the seamanship manual,
Right.
and you were encouraged to read that and learn it.
Okay, right. So after your training had finished at the Isle of Man,
Right,
were you first posted?
You've done your finals examinations in seamanship, in signalling, in sailing, boating, at school. You were expected to pass school examinations as well.
Right.
And you went into draft division, which means you were then waiting for your first ever posting.
Right.
Well, I went in draft division, and next thing I knew, my class was sent on 14 days foreign service leave, which meant that we were going to get posted into a ship overseas.
Right.
Now, one of my classmates, all through my time, had been a South African, Mac McLennan, and he had relatives in Scotland, but he'd never ever met them. And so he used to come and spend his leaves with me, and he came home with me when we were on 14 days foreign service leave. And we were generally enjoying ourselves at home. And one day, the old telegraph boy, with their buckled belt and their little hat, cycled up to the house, came up, knocked on the door, and we'd seen him from the window, and went to the door, and my mum went out, and he said, McLennan? Said, Max said, yeah, he's turned white. And I remember my mother said, perhaps it's his family. Anyway, we waited while he opened it, and he said, I've got to go back. I've been recalled. I've got to catch the boat back tonight.
Right.
So I said, well, if you've got to go back, I'm most certainly going to have to go back as well. So we thanked the telegraph boy and said, I expect there'll be another one in a minute. Anyway, sure enough, about 20 minutes later,
Right.
another telegraph boy, so it was that, came up. Hal said, yeah, know what it is. Same thing. So my mum had already said, when Mac goes, I better start getting your clothes together.
Mm-hmm.
You know, your clean washing and all that sort of thing. What we had to do was catch a train back to Fleetwood that night, and we were due to go back on the night ferry. It told us to return by night ferry. So we left and went back, caught the night ferry. We went aboard, but we never pulled out till about 2 o'clock in the morning, I think, from Fleetwood, which meant that we arrived 6 o'clock, 6:30, in Douglas, onto lorries, back up to the camp. And anyway, we were told to go to the clothing store. We were issued with tropical kit and told we would have a muster next morning, a kit inspection.
Yep.
So that was a performance. You used to have to lay it all out, and it had to be rolled up and the same width as the seamanship manual, all the way up.
Right. Yeah.
And we done that, and they said, right, you're on the ferry tonight. That was the next day. So we caught the ferry back again. Had to caught the train from Fleetwood, and we went from Fleetwood to Crewe, and then Crewe to Falmouth. And then caught a boat out, and there was a LCA carrier out in the bay.
LCA.
Landing craft assault.
Okay.
had rows of them along. And it was acting as a troop ship, and we went aboard there, and we pulled out, and we didn't know where we were heading for. But anyway, we finished up in Ceylon, or Sri Lanka as it is now, and then disembarked and went into a transit camp. And then we were told that we were going to go to Trincomalee, which was the other side of the island, the following day to rejoin, or to join, the battleship Nelson.
Right.
And that was our final destination. We were crew of Nelson. Anyway, the next day we mustered with our kit bags and hammocks down to the jetty, and these pinnaces came in and loaded all the stuff. And we went out in the harbour, and I remember going round the stern of this battleship, and I'd never seen such a big ship in all my life. How on earth it floated, I'll never know. It was so wide. Anyway, we went aboard and down to the boys' mess, and half an hour after we went aboard, we let go from the buoy and went out through the boom and to sea.
Half an hour?
We all, went in half an hour. We went aboard about 4 o'clock, and about 4:30 we were off.
And when was this, Roy? Can you remember?
Good Lord, no. When would that have been?
How long were you at the Isle of Man for?
12 months.
So, Roy, so you joined HMS Nelson. 30 minutes after you got on board, it sailed out of Trincomalee Harbour, and this was round about October 1944.
Yeah.
Okay.
Had no idea where we were going, of course. And we finished up, in fact, going to the Andaman and the Nicobar Islands. Because having got to sea, we formed up with a sort of fleet, protection fleet. I remember there were two cruisers. One of them was the Exeter. Can't remember what the other one was. And there was an aircraft carrier. And then there was a flotilla of destroyers. And then minesweepers. And of course, being flagship, we were in the centre, and we had a cruiser. One cruiser was ahead of us, one behind us. The carrier, I think, was behind that. Then there were the destroyer, I think, round us, and then the minesweepers. And what was happening, the Japs were in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, and we were going to give them a bit of a pasting, apparently. But we knew that they'd sown mines, so we had to negotiate the minefields, and we in fact lost 2 sweepers. Because once we got within striking distance of the Andaman and Nicobars, they sent out their aeroplanes, kamikazes, and they tried to get to the big ships, of course, but they got to get through the screen.
Yep.
And of course, everybody opened up on them and didn't have a lot of chance. But one of them actually came down behind the funnel of one of the sweepers. Now I can't remember, the 2 sweepers we lost was HMS Squirrel and HMS Vestal. And I can't remember which one was which, but one of them had a kamikaze aeroplane, hit it behind the funnel and broke its back and sank. And the other one actually hit a mine, or it trapped a mine, and it cut it loose and come back and hit the ship. And we took survivors on board, being a major ship and having a big sick bay. But it only sort of lasted, I don't know, a few hours, I suppose. We probably might have been around for about 10 hours, something like that.
What was your action station?
Well, my action stations I got aboard was the 6-inch lower quarters.
Right.
The shell room, 6-inch shell room, which I didn't like because I had to go down a big hatch on the chain. There was a big, and the hatch used to be closed with the chain on there, and I used to think, Christ, if the ship's sinking, I'll never get out of there.
Right.
And then that was where my action station. But as I say, this was we went out immediately. I joined the ship. But when we come back to Trincomalee 3 or 4 days later, my workplace was the quarterdeck, and I remember the captain of the quarterdeck coming to me where I was working and saying, "Get yourself up to the gunnery office. You're required by the chief GI." So off I went, and I went in there, and he said, "Right, laddie, go down and put your best bib and tucker on," which meant I was in a boiler suit, which was our working rig, and I had to put shorts on and a white front and shoes. And I come back and he said, "Right, stand to attention." And I stood, and he walked all round me. "Yes, you'll do," he said. "You are now the Admiral's messenger."
Right.
He said, "Wherever the Admiral goes, you will follow him like a little puppy dog."
Right. And the Admiral was?
And your action station will be on the Admiral's bridge.
Right.
And I thought, thank Christ I'm out of the shell room. So I took up a job, and they said that, you know, the staff officers, flag officer, would tell you, we know what your duties are, what times you'll be required. So I used to go up on the bridge, and the Admiral's bridge was 1 step higher than the captain's bridge. Up the superstructure, you know, as high as you could bloody get. So you had an all-round view of what was going on.
Who was the Admiral, Roy?
The Admiral was Vice Admiral Sir H.C.T. Walker.
Right.
He was known as Hookey Walker because he had he'd lost an arm at Zeebrugge in the First World War and carried on in the Navy. And in fact, he had a brass hook that he used to wear in harbour, but at sea he just used to pin his shirt sleeve to his chest.
Right.
Nice bloke, actually, but he was the C&C East Indies. And I clashed with him a couple of times when I was up on the bridge, because when we came in to the harbour, we used to operate out and back again, out back. As flag officer, he used to get saluted by the other ships. They used to call their ship's company to attention, face to starboard, and the duty officer or the officer of the watch would stand there and salute the flag. And I was just there with me hands on my chin on my arms, and he came, he had his hook on actually, and he put his hook down the back of my neck. Said, stand up laddie, they're saluting me." But he treated me right. He had his chief of staff was the Captain Abbott, who was the first real naval officer that I recall seeing with huge tattoos.
Right.
He had dragons up his arm. And he was a big man, Captain Abbott. He must have been 6'1". And he had these huge dragons all the way up his arm. And then he had a New Zealand radar officer, I remember. and then his own flag lieutenant. And so I used to go up on the bridge, and they would say to me, or the admiral would be there, or he'd go down and go off the bridge, and they'd say, right, you can stand down now, come back, at 4 o'clock or whatever. And if they sounded action stations, that's where I used to head for. But I remember being at sea, and I was up on the bridge at night, during the night, and the New Zealand radar officer said to me, "Do you think we can have some kai, messenger?" Kai is cocoa, which I used to brew at night time. And you'd go to the galley and there'd be a great big cauldron of this grease floating on top of it. And you'd dip your fanny in it and your jug, whatever you have.
Dip your fanny?
Yeah, they're called fannies. Funny enough.
Cups and
rum fanny and
Okay.
Anyway, I carried it up to the bridge, but I got halfway up on the companionway and I bloody slipped, and the bloody jug went up in the air and tumbled down the steps. The cocoa went all over the place, and of course we were at sea and it was a darkened ship, I was saying no lights because of the enemy seeing and all that sort of thing, and the captain was in his sea cabin, which was in the superstructure, so he was close to the bridge. And the door opened, and he came out in the dark, and he said, "Who's that?" And I hid underneath the bloody... He hid under the companionway. I thought, I'm not going to say anything. "Who's that? There's got to be somebody here." And he kept saying, "I know you're there." And eventually I said, "It's me, sir." "Who's me?" "I'm your messenger, sir." "I'll drop the kayaks." "Well, you better clear it up in the morning," he said.
Yeah.
Because they made so much bloody noise. So the next morning, or when it was daylight, I had to get a bucket and wash them and clean all the stairs, wipe all the cocoa away. The next thing well, things went on and we went out and back and out at sea.
How much action did you see when you were
well, not really, because we used to stand off for long way.
Right.
Being the battleship, as I was saying, we'd fire our guns over a long, range.
Yeah. What was the range of the big guns on the Nelson? Can you remember?
22 miles.
22 miles.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the limit, Well, the shell was 1.25 tons.
Right.
16 inch.
So what about living conditions on board? What was the food like for you?
Well, on the boys' mess, not too bad. They used to take care of us. But I learnt a lesson. We always used to go down and incorrectly ask for gash, which was anything left over. And I went down on one occasion, I was cook of the mess, and I said to the chef, "Any gash?" And he said, "Get your arse out of here." He said, "For your information, gash goes over the side. Gash is rubbish."
Right.
What I meant is leftovers.
Yep.
I used the wrong word. So learned not to use that again. But we'd go back and say, "Any spare?" And he'd say, "I'll see if I can find some." And if it was a suet pudding or something, you'd get another dump of
Right.
take it down to share it out. But we went out on one occasion and we got out to sea, and it said the captain would address the ship's company in 10 minutes' time. And so we waited. And they'd already dropped the first atomic bomb. I don't know which was first and which was second.
Hiroshima was first, wasn't it?
Yeah, but they dropped the first one. And then the captain came on and he said, the captain speaking, he said, for your information, the Americans have dropped the second atomic bomb at Nagasaki. I won't go into details, but the Japanese have offered to surrender unconditionally. Well, that's what they were demanding.
Yeah.
He said, so our little escapade will not go ahead now. There'll be other plans of which I will tell you about later. But I can tell you that we were heading for Malaya, where it should have been the original D-Day on Sunday.
Right.
And the plan was to land troops to retake Malaya. He said, but that will now not happen, of course. And I'll advise you as and when, you know. Anyway, we all thought, oh, that's good, yeah, it's come to an end and that. And I remember him coming on next day or later, saying, well, the plan is that we're going to land the troops as was planned at Port Swetnam and Port Dixon. But because the Japanese were offered to surrender, it's hoped that they will adhere to their promise and not fight, and there'll be no gunfire or anything.
Right.
But just to be sure, we'll be there in case. And I remember the French battleship, the Richelieu, was with us. Anyway, oh, and then before that he said we should be going to Penang Island to accept the surrender of the Japanese at Penang. Which we did. We went up, and you got that photograph.
Yeah.
When we went up there.
Yeah, we'll add that photograph.
And they were told to bring these. Well, you've got the story of the charts of the minefields, which I cuddled in a pool of blood.
Do you want to expand on why you were doing what happened?
Well, after they signed the surrender plan, we went down the Malacca Straits to Port Swetnam and Port Dixon, and we stood off while the troops from the landing assault craft went ashore, and we had the guns trained round just in case. And then as they got nearer and nearer the beach, we all waited with sort of bated breath. And they ran up the beach, nothing, no gunfire, nothing. And they said, well, at least they've kept their word. So we hung around for a while, and then with the minesweepers ahead of us, we went down into Singapore.
Would you like to tell the story of when the Japanese brought the minefield maps onto Nelson?
Yeah, I can do that. When we went to Penang, they came off in what was like a fishing trawler, and there was a Japanese admiral, and I think a general, and there were interpreters and flag officers, and they were told to bring the minefields, charts of the minefields to the Malacca Straits, so the whole fleet could get down to Port Swetnam and Port Dixon. And Captain Abbott took them off of this Japanese naval officer, and he gave them to me and said, right, bring them to the Admiral's stateroom, which is where they were going to sign the surrender. Now the Admiral's stateroom is right aft on the stern, on below deck. So I let everybody go off ahead of me, and I followed on in the rear. And to get down, I had to go down the companionway. And these, I suppose they were like that. I don't know, I was carrying them in the arms. But I must have slipped. I don't remember it to this day.
Right.
I must have slipped on the stairs and I went a cropper. Don't remember it until I came to, and I was sitting on an officer's bunk in his cabin, and I had a big wad of cotton wool and bandages around there. And I remember saying, "What's happened?" They said, "It's all right. It's all right. You just had a fall. You slipped and knocked yourself out." They said, "We're waiting for a stretcher to take you to sick bay." So I said, "Well, I can walk there." They said, "Are you sure?" I said, "Yes." Anyway, I got up to walk, and that's the last I remember. I must have passed out again. Because the next thing I woke up and I'm on the table in the theatre, and the doctor's stitching my chin up. Anyway, they said to me, "You might have a bit of amnesia, so we're going to keep you in for observation." So they said, "We sent down to your mess and told your messmates to bring up your toilet gear and anything you might want," that sort of towel. And they put me in the bunk, and I was there. I think I slept then. The next morning, there's a lot of hustle and bustle, people going around straightening beds and mopping floors and all that sort of thing. And I thought, what on earth's going on here? And all the medical staff appeared, Surgeon Commander and the doctors. And then the door burst open and in comes the Admiral. "Where is he?" He said, "Where is he?" And they indicate where I am. Anyway, he comes over to me in the cot. That was a silly bloody thing to do, wasn't it? He said, "I'm sitting waiting for charts, the mine builds." He said, "And you're outside cuddling them in a pool of blood." What happened? I said, "Well, I don't remember." I said, "They told me I must have slipped and caught my chin on the flooding belt or something." They said, "Are they taking care of you?" I said, "Yes, they are." "Have you got everything you want?" I said, "Yes, I have." "Right," he said, "well, you'd better not come back to work until you're fit." And with that, he turned on his heels and off he marched.
How long were you in sick bay for?
Only like, what, I don't know, 36 hours.
Right.
Anyway, there was a sick berth attendant who'd been standing in the background. When they'd all disappeared, he wandered across and he looked at me and he said, "Who are you?" I mean, you could see that I was only a youngster.
Yeah.
I thought I was the Admiral's son or something, I don't know. So, "Who are you?" So I said, "I'm the Admiral's messenger." Oh, right.
Right, so we take a break there, Roy. Okay, Roy, so
Well,
you got out of the sick bay and HMS Nelson was sailing down towards Singapore.
Yes, we were going to Singapore, aided by the charts, making sure we were getting a safe passage.
Yeah.
And we must have been the earliest ships into Singapore after the surrender. It was a proper shabby place, whereas Singapore, the Singapore that I know now, and the Singapore that I learnt later when I was still serving in England, well, it was a nice, clean place.
Yeah.
But the occupation by the Japanese had lowered it a great deal. Principally, I think what we were aiming to do was get the prisoners out of the prison camps.
Yeah.
In and around Singapore and get them onto ships to go home. Now, there were lots of them in respect of English, Australian, some New Zealanders, and Dutch. And the aim was to sort of get them kitted up with clothes, because they didn't have anything other than loincloths.
Yeah.
And feed them, get them clean shaven and all that. Most of them had beards, and most of them, and prepare them for repatriation. I went with a working party up to Changi Jail, which was a civil penitentiary, which the Japanese had let all the civil prisoners go and used it as a prisoner of war camp. But when I say they used it as a camp, they used it as a base camp, because mainly if prisoners were fit, they were sent up country to work on the railway.
Yeah.
If they weren't fit, or they wanted so many people to, obviously, to work in and around Singapore, they stayed there. In Singapore itself. And of course the next thing was the signing of the surrender at Singapore. This was going to be done by Mountbatten himself in the municipal buildings, which is right in front of the Padang, and the Padang is where the Singapore Cricket Club played.
Right.
And the Singapore Cricket Club house, which was at one end of the Padang, had in fact been the headquarters of the Japanese police, Kempo Tai.
Right.
And some horrible stories come out there about tortures and one thing and another. Now, I suppose being a boy seaman, most of us were fairly up on our drill, rifle drill and that. It seemed to me that we were all in the surrender ceremony, forming the guard. We out on the Padang, and I remember one side of us we had the Gurkhas, and the other side there was RAF, I think it was. And Mountbatten came round and inspected and walked along, stopped and talked to a few. And then he stood all resplendent in his white tunic, trousers and medal ribbons and one thing and another. I'm about to sign the surrender on behalf of all of you in the Southeast Asia Command. Anyway, the sort of Black Mariahs drew up, and out got these Japanese higher ranking officers, Admiral and General, marching between high ranking officers, colonels and air group captains, and our commander on board Nelson was there. They were there marching either side of them. And I remember as they went up the steps, a load of bricks and everything else came out of the local populace. So they had to duck, miss them, including our people. Anyway, they signed the surrender in there. Didn't see much of that, obviously. It was all done inside.
Yep.
He came in, when I said he spoke to us after. I had just signed the surrender.
Right.
On your behalf, accepted the surrender of all you people in the Southeast Asia Command. And General Itagaki, I think he was. Now, during the course of my stay there and being up at Changi Camp, I met an Australian. I can't remember how I came across him. but he was a corporal in the Royal Australian Army Medical Corps.
He'd been a prisoner in
And
Singapore.
he'd been a prisoner
Right.
in Changi, and that's how I got to meet him. And I took him aboard ship. I said, "Come aboard ship." I said, "No, you know, we get feed you and take you to the canteen bay, get you some stuff." And I believe I told the canteen manager that I'd bumped into a cousin. I said, "Can we fix that?" Of course we can," he said. "Bring him up," he said. And he went up anyway. I remember he got toilet gear, soap, and talcum powder, and cigarettes, chocolate, packets of biscuits, and all that sort of thing. And I used to see him when I went ashore. He'd show me parts of Singapore about where they worked and all that. And that's when one day we met these Japanese prisoners of war. And they were pulling on tow ropes what I can only describe as the chassis of a London transport bus.
Right.
The wheels and the chassis and a seat with the steering wheel and a place to sit where you could drive it. Nothing else on top of that. And on top of the chassis they had picks and shovels and brooms and all that sort of thing, where they'd been made to work. And they were taking them back to the camp, I suppose. And Max suddenly yells out, "Mikanuri, Mikanuri." I didn't know what it was all about. But I subsequently found out, and can tell you the story, that Mikanuri had been a guard in the Changi jail. And he was a guard in the sick bay. Now apparently that they had a good Japanese officer, according to Mac, who told his soldiers that they were doctors. They weren't sick berth attendants or nurses or whatever. They were doctors, and if they said a man was unfit to work, that was it.
Yep.
He was unfit to work. Anyway, I say, I subsequently got the story from Mac, that he had said that this chap was unfit to work and couldn't go on the work detail, and Mick and Yuri had said, yes, he said he works. No, he said, "I'm doctor, I say no work." Mick and Yuri said, "I'm guard, I say work," you know. And they stood arguing, and all of a sudden Mick and Yuri brings his rifle butt up and cracks him across the ribs. And apparently he broke a couple of ribs. And he never forgot this. And I say, when he saw him, he went berserk. And I thought to myself, you're going to get yourself into trouble here. And they had big Indian guards, doggers, marching alongside them and standing on the chassis with guns, automatic weapons and that. And Mac tried to tell them, maybe with gestures and words, that he'd been a prisoner of war and that this bloke had been a guard and abused him and he wanted to get his own back. And I'm sure the Indian bloke never understood a word, but he just looked at him and smiled. And he went and faced him as he's marching along. "Mick and Yuri," he said, "you bastard, you remember?" Nine. Their no is some similar to German, I think. Nine, something like that. Nine. "Yes, you do, you bastard." He said, "You do remember." He said, "You broke my fucking ribs." I said, "No. He said, "Well, I'll make you fucking remember." And with that, he lashed into him.
Yeah.
And of course, alongside the streets and that in Singapore, you've got monsoon ditches.
Yeah.
Where the rainwater runs away. Anyway, they tumbled into the rainwater ditch, like, and he was thumping 7 barrels of shit out of him. So anyway, a couple of bystanders and we tried to separate them. And pulled him on and said, come on, you're going to get yourself into trouble. And there's a bloke took a photograph of it. And I thought, oh, and the Japanese picked Mick and Yuri up and laid him on the chassis. And he was bleeding from where he'd hit him and that. And they carried on marching down the road. And of course, I said to him, what was that all about? I said, you know, you're lucky you never got bloody shot. And he said, no, well, he said, I lost my head, and he said, and then he told me the story, he'd been, what happened.
Yeah.
And the bloke who'd taken the photograph, he said, will you be around here at this time tomorrow? He said, and I'll let you have a picture of that. Max said, we'll have to be here tomorrow at that time. Anyway, I used to see him, and we actually stayed in Singapore for, I would think, I don't know, about 6 weeks or so. They were gradually getting the prisoners out, putting them on these hospital ships and and carriers, troop carriers, sending them home. And I remember the Dutch and the English were being sent out round South Africa to make the journey longer, give them time to recuperate.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas the Australians and New Zealanders didn't have far to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, comes a time when we're going to leave. We've been told we're going back to the UK, but we're going to go via Kilindini in East Africa, where we're going to meet up with HMS Howe, and we will swap some of the ship's company. So then I started to get worried. I thought, oh Christ, it's just been more that I'll get swapped. I won't get home. Anyway, we went to Kilindini, and the Howe was there, and we swapped some of the ship's company. But I didn't get swapped. And then we then came up the Red Sea, through the Med and home, and the Howe went east. But in actual fact, I think she went to Hong Kong and Hawaii and then across the Pacific and came home that way, and she got home just a couple of 3 months later after we did.
Right.
But we headed for home, and I remember they put about 20 wrens and nurses and women's services in the Admiral's day cabin, or the Admiral's suite. They were all pregnant.
All right.
And a lot of them had, their husbands were out there.
Okay.
They volunteered out there. In fact, a couple of them were married to, I think, people on board in Nelson, but they were only allowed to meet certain time in the evening. And I was a quarter deckman, and looking after the Admiral's Wassams, and I had to make sure that his quarters was okay with these pregnant bloody wrens. Anyway, we came and we tied up at Railway Jetty at Portsmouth, and I remember we flew a great big paying off pennant. Oh Christ, it must have been about 50 yards long, I think.
Right.
As we came up.
So what's a paying off pennant then, Roy?
To say that the ship was paying off. That they were, getting rid of the ship's company, they were going back to their base sort of thing.
Right.
But when you've done a commission, not so much during the war, but in peacetime they had paying off pennants. And the pennants were, the the length of the pennant was dependent on how long you've been away.
Okay.
Anyway, we tied up there, and I went ashore, I remember, and I had relatives in Southsea. My mum's brother, Uncle Ted, and his wife Brenda, they lived there, and I went round to their house. I don't know where Ted was, because he was in the Navy. But Brenda was there, so she said, "Didn't you think about going up to see your mum and dad?" So I said, "Well, I thought about it." She said, "Well, they will be disappointed if they know you've arrived and you haven't made any attempt to see them." She said, "You haven't got to be back on board till tomorrow, have you?" I said, "No," because by that time I'd come from the boys' mess second to the because I got advanced as a ordinary seaman.
Right. Yep.
17 and a half. And that's when I lost my job as Admiral's Messenger on the way home, I think. So I made up my mind that I would go home. So I went down to Fratton station, bought myself a ticket, which was very cheap in those days, I remember. And it was Saturday, and I thought I'll get off the bus at the Fountain, which is where my dad used to drink, the pub.
Right.
And he used to love to play dominoes up in the corner. Anyway, I remember getting off the bus and walking in, and as I did, one of the men looked up and saw me, and he turned round and he said, "Hey, Fred, there's your boy." Well, my dad dropped his bloody dominoes, and he couldn't get across the bar fast enough. Came in, "Oh, hello, son, are you all right?" And I said, "Have you seen your mother?" I said, "No, I've just got off the bus from the station." "Oh," he said, "well, she's babysitting." She was looking after somebody up the road.
How long had it been since you'd seen your father then?
Well, I don't know, but that would have been, good Lord, when that must have been about, oh, I'm trying to think.
How long had it taken you to get back?
It'd only been about 12 months, that's all, because I went out, what did I say, November time. I went out in November.
October, November time you sailed out.
That's right, it must have been December when I come back,
right.
I think.
Okay.
Yeah, because we stayed, because the surrender was signed in September. Or they surrendered in September. But the actual ceremony didn't take place until they'd made all the arrangements. And then we went to Singapore. Or we went to Penang, Singapore. And we stayed, it must have been 6 or 8 weeks in Singapore. And then to get home from Singapore to Portsmouth. Yeah, it must have been December.
Right. So
I think we arrived just before Christmas. So it was about 12 months.
So you met your dad. Did you get to meet your mum?
I did, yeah. I walked up the road, and as I walked up the road, I heard my cousin's voice on the other side of the road, talking to her mum and dad, my cousin Joy. She must have done something, and my auntie Molly said, "Oh, Joy, don't do something." And I mimicked her. Right. And they come rushing across the road and embraced me. And I said, "When did you get home?" I said, "Well, we got this morning. I've just come on now." I said, "I'm going to see Mum." I said, "She's babysitting." So they said, my Auntie Molly said, you go onto the fountain, Wally, and meet Fred, and we'll go with Roy. So we made a plan that she would knock at the door of this house where she was babysitting, and I would hide round the corner. And the Joy would say, all right, I'll close the door, Auntie Helen, but she'd leave it open,
Right.
and I would walk in. And they knocked on the door, and she came to the door. Oh, hello. Hello, they said. So she said, I'll close the door, Auntie Helen. And I sort of pushed it open, and I took my hat off. And I went, God, I see my mother. Oh, no, no. How long have you been there? So said we met him walking up the road. Wally's gone down to the pub, the Fred. And they said, but we'd come up to see you.
But you could only stay there for one night?
Yeah, I had to go back next morning. Yeah. I had to get up early and catch a train. I had to be back on board, I think, by 9 o'clock, something like that.
Right.
That Sunday morning, and then I think on the Tuesday, I was drafted back into barracks because she'd gone into Portsmouth and I was a Chatham rating. And there were other Chatham ratings. And we were leaving to go back to Chatham. And I think there must have been, I don't know, 10 or a dozen of us on draft on the Tuesday. Went to the station.
So what does that mean, Roy, that you were a Chatham rating but you were in Portsmouth? So you have to return
when you joined the Navy, then my son, you were assigned a port division. And it depended a lot on where you lived, actually.
Right.
Because all Londoners were
Chatham.
Were Chatham. People who lived in the West Country were all Devonport.
Yep.
And people from the Midlands and what's name could be Portsmouth or anything.
Right.
So your official number had a prefix. It had C with Chatham, P Portsmouth, or D Devonport.
Right.
But earlier on, I said my number was CJX.
Yep.
Which means Chatham.
Yep.
And JX was seaman. I was a Chatham seaman. And in that respect, Chatham was my port division. So naturally I got sent back to Chatham.
And what happened then, Roy? So
well, I went into Chatham and I was like any draftee, coming in from a ship, worked out how long I'd been away, how long since I'd had any leave, and I'd done the routine, went to the pay office, got some money, drew some ration coupons and went on leave.
okay. How long for?
God, I can't remember how long it would have been.
When you joined the Navy, though, did you sign up for a minimum term, or was it just for the duration of the war, or what was the arrangement?
When you join as a boy seaman, you sign on, in those days, you sign on for 12 years from the age of 18.
Okay.
So anything you do before then
Doesn't count.
doesn't count.
Right.
Via grazie.
Yep.
Your time starts when you're 18.
Right.
So anybody who's on a 12-year engagement actually leaves the Navy the day before his 30th birthday.
Right.
If you signed on to do 22, you used to leave the day before your 40th birthday.
Right.
And that's when you got a pension.
Okay.
So, and as I say, any of us who joined during the war, boy seamen, we were Navy, and we just had to soldier on. Oh, sailor on.
But going back to Singapore and that, I mean, apart from your mate having a go at the Japanese guard that he'd met. Did you see much in the way of the Japanese being attacked, or were they too well protected by the Indians?
They used to pass streets where Singapore is very much a multiracial.
Right.
You got Indians, Chinese, Malays, Tamils, Thais, and they live in cramped quarters, as you imagine, with all these signs and paintings and lights you've seen.
Yeah.
Now, when they passed a turning which was a living neighbourhood, they sometimes had these gangs of people descended on them with batons and sticks, and obviously they didn't want to get caught or was aimed by the guards, so they were in and out in a flash.
Right.
But they would do as much to them as harm to them as they could in a short space of time. But I actually saw a Japanese officer commit harikari
Right.
in Changi. Nobody interrupted him, but because they became the captors, obviously when surrender came, and this bloke came out dressed in robes, and he knelt down, and he'd got a bowl of some kind of, I remember, that there was drink or what, food, and he was bowing and washing, and then he picked up this knife or dagger, stuck it underneath this, and like that, and he just bled and toppled over. And then there was, I never saw it, but apparently, in fact I think it was Mac who told me, some Japanese officers had a sake party, which was their whiskey, and they'd managed to get hold on to or secrete some hand grenades.
Yeah.
And they took the pins out and threw them at each other and blew themselves up.
Right.
I think there were 3 or 4 of them got killed doing that. But there were a lot of women moved into Changi too, I remember. Because what principally we did when we went in there, we took loads of bales of clothes, and they were all done up in, obviously been prepared well ahead, and there were shorts and shirts and vests, boots, underwear, towels, and they were issued to them to wear. And then the women set up these distribution centres, and they also set up kitchens, field kitchens.
Yeah.
For food, cooking food and that, and preparing food for them, because but they had to be careful about what they fed them, because they,
They hadn't had much to eat for the previous 4 or 5 years. Yeah.
They were all suffering malnutrition,
Yeah.
one thing, beriberi and malaria. Yeah, they were in a bad way, a lot of them, in a bad way.
Okay, I think on that note, we'll finish the interview. That's right.
Right.
Thank you very much, sir.